Hey, is this thing on? Hello? Hit it again. I think it's on now. Welcome to Hiker Trash Radio, where each week, Doc will drag some colorful characters out of the woods to talk trail and Type 2 fun. If you're aspiring hiker trash, or if you're just looking to understand the hiker trash in your life, look no further. So lace up those boots, gnaw on some jerky, and settle into your 20-mile pace as we fire up the podcast from somewhere deep in the backcountry. It's time to embrace the suck.
Welcome back to another week on the trail, dirtbags, hiker trash, and of course, good-smelling day hikers. I'm Doc, and this is Hiker Trash Radio. Hey, if you like what we're doing here, help us out. Take just a minute, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. And if you don't like what we're doing, just go ahead and keep that to yourself. All right, let's get to this week's guest, author, thru hiker, and a huge advocate for women in the outdoors, Christine Reed. How's it going, Christine?
Best day ever. How are you?
Best day ever. I love it. I love it. Can I use that clip as part of my promotional materials?
Absolutely.
Okay, nice. What do you think about the rebrand? Because we've done a little bit of changing things around here on the podcast since the last time you were on.
I love it. I think it was folly that nobody was using hiker trash in their hiking podcast.
Right? We had a family brainstorming session on the way down to some event during Memorial Day, and we're throwing around ideas in the car, and Hiker Trash Radio came up. And I thought, that's gotta exist. Someone's got that handle somewhere. We checked websites, we checked YouTube, we checked podcasts, nothing. I said, we're doing it. Let's jump on it.
Do it. No longer a missed opportunity.
That's right. That's right. Nailed it. Now, for our listeners who are hearing you for the very first time, remind us of your trail name and this author gig that I talked about. What book did you write, or what books have you written?
Oh, now you're giving me too much credit. My trail name is Lady Unicorn, and the book that I wrote is called Alone in Wonderland, and it centers around the Wonderland Trail in Washington.
Any more on that?
Do you want me to talk more about the book? Or
Well, you know what? I save it. We will get into a little recap of the book review as we go on. So, Lady Unicorn, that's a lot of syllables. Did anybody ever tell you that? That's a mouthful to get out in an emergency.
I think it was actually longer to begin with. There was a short period of time where I was going by Lady Amalthea, which I think is slightly longer. And for any old school cartoon fans, that is a reference to the movie The Last Unicorn. And then people were like, I don't know what you're talking about. It was just one of those references that nobody understood. And so I was constantly having to explain it. And so it got somewhat shortened, but it really just changed so that people understood what was happening.
Right.
To Lady Unicorn, yeah.
Now you have to tell us in just a second how Lady Unicorn or Lady Amalthea, how that all came about. But you remind me of when I talked to Nicholas Horvat from Croatia, did the PCT, and then he went back to Croatia and said, we need something like this in our country. And he created the Croatian Long Distance Trail. And on the PCT, he was given the trail name of Tesla because Nikola Tesla was from Croatia. Nikola was from Croatia, so he said Tesla. And he would run into people after he'd been named. He would run into people and they'd ask, what's your trail name? And he'd say Tesla. And they said, oh, like the car. And he said, no, it's because of the inventor, the famous inventor, lived from Croatia, named Nikola. He explained that 5 or 6 times. And then after that many times, the next person said, oh, like the car. And he just said, yes, yeah, because of the car. Yeah, I can imagine after having to explain the origin story of Lady Amalthea. Am I getting that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it might be better maybe just to change that.
Yeah, and it turns out that just a lot of people haven't seen that movie, which is crazy to me because I watched it 1,000 times as a child. But there was actually somebody else on the trail the same year as me who was going by Schmendrick, which is also a character from that movie.
What is the name of the movie?
The Last Unicorn.
I have not seen that. I must be aging myself right now.
It's actually, I think it was made in the 80s. I used to borrow it from the library when I was a kid. And it was like a cartoon in the style of the Hobbit cartoons, if that tells you anything.
Yeah. So our millennials right now, they're wondering how you can borrow a movie from the library. They're trying to wrap their minds around that concept.
Now you're
what kind of
now you're
sorcery is this?
now you're infantilizing millennials. I'm a millennial. I'm 33
Oh,
years
oh,
old.
sorry.
I think you mean Gen Z.
Gen Z. That's what I meant. I'm so old I can't even keep the generations straight. So that's my bad.
Yeah, VHS. We just borrow VHSs from
That's
the
right.
library.
Words that I did not anticipate hearing this morning when I got out of bed. Infantilizing. That's a good one. That's a good. You must be an author.
Words are my thing.
Yes, they are. They are. And so, again, how did it come up that people found out that you were enamored with The Last Unicorn and give you this name?
It was one of those, I was the last person on the AT without a trail name. And then there was some people I was hanging out with who were like, why don't you have a trail name? We have to get you some name. So it was a little bit forced. It definitely wasn't like a funny story, but I've been a unicorn girl like since childhood. I watched that movie 1,000 times. I'm actually ironically like wearing this unicorn t-shirt today that I have had since I was like 9 years old.
And you
tattoo.
still fit into the t-shirt from when you're 9 years old. Congratulations.
It was 1999, so like big t-shirt, bike shorts was like the fashion.
Hey, unicorn, take the compliment, all right?
Trust me, I'm not the same size I was when I was 9 years old. I was just wearing an oversized adult's large t-shirt as a 9-year-old, but I found it in a drawer recently and was like, oh my gosh, this has to come back out.
Mm-hmm. And was it like you're the only person out here without a trail name? You're like a unicorn?
Maybe.
Because it's rare?
It was just, they were like, what do you like? What are you into? Then it became like a 20 questions thing. And I was like, I've always loved unicorns. I shouldn't have said that, but I'm actually really happy to be Lady Unicorn. So I'm glad that it worked out, but it could have been a lot worse. So it just became this conversation about like, how could we work that in? And then another girl actually was like, have you seen the movie The Last Unicorn? And I said, oh, I used to love that movie. And so she suggested Lady Amalthea, which I really liked, not knowing that it would become this thing I would have to constantly explain. I think I was Lady Amalthea for maybe 10 days. And somebody told me that's too confusing and nobody knows what it is and you should change it. And so then there was like a second brainstorm in which somebody suggested I go by Unicorn Girl, which I said, no, absolutely not. But Lady Unicorn became the amalgamation of those two things.
Got it. Should we do some analysis right now? I mean, what is it about unicorns that draws you to them? What the concept of unicorn? What's going on with you?
I don't know. I know unicorns have gone through like a resurgence of popularity in the last couple of years, which has been interesting as a longtime unicorn lover. But as a child, it's just magic and sparkles, and everything with unicorns on it is glittery and pretty. And my parents were like fantasy nerds. My dad plays Dungeons and Dragons. I was definitely raised with that backdrop. So I was reading like fantasy novels for tweens at a young age, and that was just something I was really into.
What a great childhood. Holy smokes. That's awesome.
Yeah, I had great parents that influenced me to be unabashedly nerdy.
Now, there's a time period in all of our lives when we're young and we have this maybe naive outlook, unblemished by the future hardships and realities of the world. You think the unicorn maybe symbolizes that time period in your life and just harkens back to those good old days?
There's definitely a sense of nostalgia about it. Yeah. And I also, in my adult years, I've always been like a type A success-oriented person. And I take myself very seriously in a lot of ways. And there's something about it that's like the option for me to be this other version of myself that is like playful and fun and not taking things so seriously.
Got it.
Which I appreciate. I appreciate the trail for allowing me to have that alter ego.
Is it okay if I don't take you that seriously tonight?
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay.
I've been working on that. So I don't take myself as seriously as I once did.
All right. Fair enough. Okay. Now, the last time you were on, there was a segment towards the end of the episode we called the Pro Tip Inside of the Week. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. I don't remember what I said, though.
Okay. No, I don't. So We'll see. Neither one of us will know if it's the same thing, but we have rebranded a little bit. And in addition to becoming Hiker Trash Radio, we've also taken those segment titles and made them more hiking related. So it's not pro tip inside of the week. It is the hiking hack. Hiking hack. So same concept though. You will share some trail wisdom with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience even better.
Right now?
No, at the end.
Okay.
Okay. Don't give it up too
Don't
early.
spoil it. Okay.
Don't spoil it. That's right.
People have to stick around till the very end for that.
That's right. That is part of the mystery. That's right. That listener engagement. Got to keep them tuned in to hear what the hiking hack from Lady Unicorn is. All right.
Trailblazers Toolkit.
See that? Trailblazers Toolkit. Also a newly named segment. We've had it before, but this is a new name, Trailblazers Toolkit. This is sponsored by the ultralight backpacking gear company 6B2 Designs. And Lady Unicorn, I love to talk about gear on the podcast. I love to hear about the most important item in my guest adventure gear. You were preparing for your next adventure, and I was the one who was supplying all of your gear to you. What is the one specific piece of gear you would insist on being packed? Give me all the specifics on that piece of gear. Tell me why you got to have it out there. And this could be any type of item. It could be gear. It could be apparel. It could be a luxury item. Christine, what is that item in your toolkit?
Okay, I recently added a sit pad, like a little foam butt pad to my pack. And I know everybody talks about this and I've always rolled my eyes about it. And I did not add it because I want to sit on it. I added it because an inflatable air mattress does not work for people with heavy butts. And my hip constantly sinks to the ground when I'm sleeping. And I wake up with really sore hips. And I've tried every single air mattress. I've tried sleeping on the foam, crappy zigzag thing that everybody loves for ultralight stuff. I've tried all the different options. And no matter what I do, my hips they hurt. And so this last trip that I went on, I was like, I'm going to take a little piece of foam and I'm just going to put that under my hips on top of the air mattress to distribute the weight of my butt. And it was amazing. Never going back.
Nice. You and I may have a similar malady. I'm trying to up my vocabulary level this episode because you threw out infantilizing. So I feel like I have to step up my game a little bit. So you and I may have a similar malady. And I was on a trip up in the Sequoias with Yahtzee and Bindi, and Yahtzee had this sit pad that I made fun of him. I openly mocked him about it until we got to some point in the trail and I had to sit down and it was just all rocks. And he said, "Here, use this." And I sat on it and it was heaven. It was heaven. But now I love the multi-use aspect of the sit pad because when I sleep on my side, my hip hits the ground. So this is key. This is awesome.
Now I guess I have to try to sit on it during the day. Sitting on rocks doesn't bother me. Having my butt be wet from like a log doesn't bother me. Like I shred the backs of my pants on a regular basis. And I could avoid that, but I want to be like hardcore and not sit on things or not sit on comfortable things. But now that I'm carrying it anyway, I guess I will.
That can be problematic, sitting on uncomfortable things. All right. You know what? Keep us talking about gear and what's in that bag of yours and other things. We've got...
It's the hiking pole.
The hiking pole. That's the same. That's the same because I'm clever. I was clever the first time around and I'm still clever. That's pole with 2 L's, like a survey, not like the thing in your hand. And this is a 7-question survey. It's going to help me give you a score on the sanity scale from 1 to 100. With 1 being completely insane and 100 being completely sane. Now, anybody who has attempted a thru hike of any of the American long trails, like you did in 2015 of the AT, that's an automatic 25-point deduction. So your top possible score is 75 tonight.
Are these the same questions as last time, or have you traded them out?
I have not traded them out, but I do have alternate sets of questions for repeat customers. I want to keep you on your toes. Yes.
Okay.
All right. As a reminder, this is 7 questions. It's not rapid fire. It's not word association. I want to hear where you fall on these issues, and I want you to explain your position because I may agree with you. I may not agree with you, but if you explain your position on these, that may influence my scoring.
Okay.
Okay.
If I can convince you, then you'll deduct less points.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah.
Got it.
Good way to look at it. All right. Question number 1 of the hiking poll. We're going to go from the third set of questions for those listeners keeping score at home. What are the top 3 topics of conversation on the trail for you? You're out there, you're in the middle of nowhere, you're maybe hiking you come across somebody out there, or maybe you're just hiking by yourself. What kinds of conversations are you holding with those people or with yourself? What are the topics?
Okay. One is, what gets your fire going? What is it that you're passionate about? What is the thing that you are about as a person?
Oh, so not like a bowstring or a flint.
No.
Like starting a fire.
No.
Not in a literal sense. We're talking metaphorically.
No, yeah, you're like life fire. What is it that fires you up?
I love that. And Christine, that's awesome. That I apply the trail name concept to each episode. I look for something that happens or is said during the episode to become the episode name, the trail name of the episode. Starting your life fire with Christine Reed. How does that sound? That sounds serious.
I think people are going to expect something if you not let that.
Expectations are high right now. Okay. You know what? I had to interrupt because that was just go. Continue. That's topic one, starting your life fire.
If they are other women, I want to know how often they pee on their shoes.
That's an issue.
And then probably something about food after that. What are you going to eat next?
Okay.
Or what are you eating in general? I'm super fascinated by food in my normal life. I worked for a health food store for several years. I've tried all kinds of different eating regimens and things. I love to dig through people's cabinets when I'm at their house. Just what kind of foods are you buying? What's in here? What do you eat on a regular basis? I'm just fascinated by food and what people eat. And especially then in the context of hiking, because then we're eating all kinds of crazy things. So
remind me to lock my food cabinets when you come up.
If you invite me to your house, I will go through your cabinets.
I want to congratulate you because I think that there are 2 pretty consistent topics on the trail. And I've asked this set of questions maybe 7, 8, 9, 10 times before on the show. And you're the first person to get those 2 worked into your answer. Congratulations. I think 2 of the most common conversation topics out there are bodily functions,
food and bathrooms,
and food. That's right. Exactly it. Okay. That was well done. Question number 2, best trail name encountered out there.
Oh gosh. I don't know. I have a lot of things I'm not into, like food trail names. I'm trying to think of something that's unusual. I met a hiker on the Colorado Trail whose trail name was Gaper, which is a word that I didn't know. And so that was interesting to me because I learned something. Apparently it's like a snowboarding reference.
Gaper.
And he was wearing snow goggles on the Colorado Trail, which I also thought was a fun fashion choice.
That is good. Protect those eyes. I would think that Gaper came from him just walking around with his mouth open all the time.
No, but I think that also is related to the reference. It's jabronis, which is something that we say in the climbing world about people who don't know what they're doing and are noobs and are being silly at the crag. Gaper is that person for snowboarding who's dopey and doesn't know what they're doing.
Got it. Jabronis, noobs. I've learned 3 new synonyms for a concept that I understood. Okay. That's good. Question number 3, toilet paper, bidet, leaves, or snowballs?
I don't want to be hiking anywhere where there's enough snow to be reliably using snowballs. So I'm a big fan of the Kula cloth, but I also, carry toilet paper. I did try the bidet thing, but I will say the travel bidet that I tried, and maybe there's a better one out there, just didn't have very much pressure behind it. And so it was quite an object to be carrying for what I felt was not very effective. So if anyone has recommendations for a really good travel bidet, I would be willing to try again because I have a bidet at the house and I love it. But toilet paper, Kula cloth.
Got it. The travel bidet was just a light squirt and didn't really help the situation.
It was, yeah. You need some pressure for a bidet to be worth carrying.
Agreed. I talked to Andrew Livingston, coach of Marion Outdoors,
Okay.
Marion Hiker Hostel on the AT.
Mm-hmm.
And he one of his tips was to warm up the water to include in the bidet, mix it with cold water so it wasn't a sudden shock.
No scalding.
Yeah, no scalding. And I proposed that if you really wanted to be invigorated and awake in the morning, that you use just water straight out of the river. And yeah.
And then you get into, now you've got, what are you, boiling water, and then you're checking the temperature. How long are we spending on this operation?
That's right. And if you're boiling the water, how much potential is there for confusion between your bidet and your water bottle? That would
hopefully none.
Yeah. All right. Question number 4, breakfast in camp, on trail, or no breakfast?
Depends on what I'm doing. If I'm going for speed and trying to do somewhere in the range of 30 miles a day, then I'll usually wait an hour into the hike to sit and cook and eat breakfast. But I guess I still would eat like a bar or something on my way out of camp. If I'm being leisurely, breakfast at camp for sure. Hang out.
What's the go-to breakfast at camp?
Oatmeal. Always oatmeal.
Consistent. Are you a creature of habit?
I am an oatmeal evangelist. It is the perfect food.
There's another candidate for the episode name, oatmeal evangelism.
Everyone should eat oatmeal. And if you think oatmeal is gross, then grow up. So at home, I have a very specific oatmeal regimen when I have a full stove and a refrigerator and all that jazz. And then I eat oatmeal kind of differently on the trail. But I very firmly believe that oatmeal with almond butter is the perfect balance of carbs, fat, protein, and it keeps you full longer than like sugary, snacky things.
Yeah. Now, Christine, it may just be the camera angle, but it looks like you're calling in from a closet.
You would think so. This is my office. It's just a disaster.
I actually did have a guest call in from a closet.
I'm not surprised.
She had a good reason. She was an employee down in McMurdo Station in Antarctica, and she was in the store that she worked in. She was in their supply closet.
Nice.
Calling in, yeah.
I have recorded from the closet if I needed it to be like super high quality sound, quiet.
Oh, I see. So for me, it's not. Right? Okay, I get it.
I asked you, do you want me to plug this microphone in? And you were like, nah, everything's good.
Yeah, Christine, get your microphone and get yourself in a closet.
Get in the closet.
Okay. Question number 5, solo hiking or trammeling?
Can it be both? I prefer...
It might impact your score, but yeah, go ahead.
I always want to go out solo. I'm happy to make friends, hang with people, do the social thing, but I don't want anyone to be relying on me for anything or to make their decisions or expect me to make my decisions based on them. Like I want to hike my own hike.
I love doing this show because it's like a therapy session. We get to explore issues and see why this has arisen.
If you want to know more about that, you can read my book.
That's right. I was going to say, why don't you want people to rely on you?
A big part of why I started long distance hiking and went on the Appalachian Trail the first time was about my independence, asserting my independence as a young woman and trying to figure out what life looked like when you weren't doing what other people told you what to do and were making your own decisions for yourself. And that is something I had not really experienced prior to the AT. And in some ways, I still hold that aspect of being on trail very dearly.
Okay. I'm never sure if the sentence is over, if there's more coming, because you're very thoughtful. I don't know if you're still processing. So we'll move on to question number 6. Rank the following in your order of preference from most favorite to least favorite.
Okay.
Ready? And it's just types of trail. Severe uphill, severe downhill, road walk.
This is going to be unpopular. I would say road walking, then uphill, then downhill, maybe downhill, then uphill. I think I'd go downhill, uphill.
So your favorite is road walking.
Like, how severe are we talking?
It's a road and it's flat.
No, the uphill and downhill.
Oh, it's severe. Severe.
It depends on the distance. If it's 1 mile, I think I would prefer 1 mile of road walking to 1 mile of 1,400 feet elevation gain.
So what if it's 10 miles each?
Oh, I don't know. This is so hard. This is a really hard question. Do people just answer this with a straight face?
Occasionally, yes. Yes.
I don't believe them. They just want to sound cool by saying they like uphill.
That's my preferred piece of trail out of those three is the severe uphill. I'm a poser. Yeah. Wait, what was it? I'm a jabroni. There you go. Jabroni.
Jabronis love severe uphill.
That's right. Another episode title right there. All right. Question number 7. What's on your head out there? Ball cap, floppy hat, straw hat, sun hoodie, or no hat?
No hat.
Just wild and loose out there.
Yeah, so I have a lot of hair. I don't know if anyone wants to look at a photo of me. Got a lot of hair. I wear my hair in braids on the trail. It's the only way to keep it manageable. And my hair is very dark and it's heavy and it's thick. And I just cannot stand to have another thing on top of my head in addition to my hair.
Got it. Now, ever consider chopping that off, going short?
I have thought about it. Yes. I did have a Britney Spears moment in 2017 and I chopped it like to chin length, which felt very dramatic. But it's a lot to deal with when it's short because it's so thick and poofy that it looks really crazy if I don't style it. So I don't know if like short hair is really easier than long hair for me.
Yeah, pictures of that?
My short hair?
Yeah, your Britney moment.
I could dig it out, yeah.
Nice. We need to include that in the promotional materials.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Hey, Lady Unicorn, stand by. I need to do some math, which requires all of my attention because I was an English teacher. So I need to use all 20 digits here. I'm going to carry the 3. We're going to divide this by root 5. Going to multiply by pi. It's very complicated. Multiply by pi. And I'm going to adjust for the water temperature in your portable bidet. And I come up with a solid score. Given the 25-point deduction, a solid score of 61. You're not all that insane.
That feels accurate.
Yeah.
At least, but if I was, would I know? I don't know.
That's another good question. Yeah. Do insane people know that they're insane?
Unless they have someone like you to tell them.
or their therapist, their podcast host, or their therapist. All right. Hey, before we get too far down the trail, as we close out the first segment here, let's just remind everybody, tell us about your background, where you grew up, kinds of sports and hobbies you were involved in as a kid, and how did you get involved in the thru hiking cult? I think you already alluded to it a little bit earlier as we were talking, but take us through that.
Yeah. So my dad was in the military, so we moved around a lot. So I don't really claim anywhere as home, but I grew up mostly in Florida and California. And I had my formative years in the Bay Area of California. I suppose you could.
Those are like polar opposites right now, right? California and Florida, the opposite ends of the spectrum on so many different levels, not just geographically. There's a lot going on in both states.
Yes, culturally, for sure. And I was in Tampa Bay area in Florida and then San Francisco Bay area in California. And my dad was in the Coast Guard. So if that explains that to people. So we moved around a lot. My parents were really nerdy book people. I lovingly refer to them as indoorsy people. So I had not really ever hiked. I think I went to 6th grade camp and maybe we did a hike there that I found unpleasant. And then the whole family moved to Arkansas when I graduated from high school because my dad was getting restationed and I went to college in Arkansas. And if you've never been to Arkansas, there is so much beautiful nature there. It's amazing. I lived there for 7 years and barely ever went outside. And I completely took for granted the beautiful place that I lived in. But then when I had graduated from college, I was 23 years old. I was working in a crappy health insurance job where I got yelled at on the phone a lot and hung out with like office ladies. And
everybody's dream.
A dream come true. I was making way too much money for someone my age living in such a cheap place, which was good because when I discovered a blog about the Appalachian Trail and decided I'm going to go be a long distance hiker, it didn't take me very long to save $10,000 and be ready to go on the trail. So I found this blog. People were talking about the Appalachian Trail changed my life. It made me discover what was important. It helped me figure out my priorities. It got me out of my dead end job. All these things that people say about long trails. And all of that sounded really appealing to me because I was really unhappy in my crappy job. And honestly, like I was drinking a lot. I didn't really have any purpose. That's one of the reasons I like to ask people what lights their fire, because at that stage in my life, I didn't have anything lighting my fire. I was just existing. And that's what got me on the trail, was like the way people talked about it, the fire that seemed to be lit for people by hiking. Even though my very few experiences with hiking were rather unpleasant, I thought I'm going to go hike for 6 months. So that's what I did. I guess I didn't hike for 6 months, but I did plan to go out for 6 months, and then things went awry, as things sometimes go.
Yep. Now, Christine, that is such an unlikely origin story for a thru hiker and for an outdoor enthusiast. Just you just described your first 22 years up until you graduated college. At any point during those 22 years, if anybody looked at your life, they would have said, "No, not a hiker. Not going to happen. This is not going to lead to someone riding alone in Wonderland." And I always find it so intriguing what the turn was, what the pivot was. How did this happen?
Yeah. What's really interesting though is I feel like in terms of long distance hiking, especially trails like the AT, it's like half and half. It's like half people who you never would have thought would be out here, and they just somehow manage to find it and then become this other person. And then it's half people who are like, I've dreamed of hiking the AT since I was a wee lad or whatever. So I feel like there are a lot of stories of people who have no business out there, who don't know what they're doing, who are carrying the Walmart tent, and they just found out about this on the internet or read a book about it. And I didn't know long distance hiking existed. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the cool things about long trail hiking, is that you get a really interesting cross section of humanity out there because it inspires people.
Yeah. And now all authors know each other. So I know that Derek Lugo and his story. Talk about having no idea, right? He heard about it and thought, I'm going to do this. And he shows up down at Springer with all of his gear, never having packed his bag and putting the bag on until he stepped foot on the trail, which is wild. The success probability for a case like that is probably so small. And he just walked himself to Maine. What an impressive story.
Yeah. And I think sometimes I say a lot that like naivete can get you really far, because a lot of times when you don't know what you should be afraid of, you're not afraid. And when I Googled, can I hike on the AT by myself? And the blogs were like, yeah, go by yourself. You'll meet people. It'll be great. And then my parents are like, you're going to die out there. And I was like, people on the internet said it's fine. I just didn't know what I didn't know. And so that allowed me to like barrel forward willy-nilly and just get out there and figure it out as I went. Sometimes I feel like people over-research, they over-prepare, and then they get in their heads about it.
Yeah. And there's only so much you can prepare for. You can't plan every minute. You can't plan every mile of a thru hike because things go wrong.
Yeah. And also, isn't part of the point of being out there to be able to say yes to things and do whatever you want in the moment of just, there's this town I didn't know was going to be there, where there's a certain thing that sounds really fun that people are going to go do, and I want to go with them. And if that's not in my itinerary, then that's a drag.
And I want to save, I don't want to cut ourselves short on this conversation. I want to save Alone in Wonderland, our little discussion on that, for after the break. So we're going to take a quick break. We're going to put a pin in that right now. We're going to pay some bills, hear from the advertisers, and we'll be right back. And welcome back. We were talking to Christine Reed, Lady Unicorn, and we have covered a lot of ground already. I don't know that I've smiled this hard during the first segment of an episode in a long time. So thank you for that. When we left, we made reference to your book, Alone in Wonderland. I think last time I pointed out that it's just 2 letters different than Alice in Wonderland. Intentional, unintentional?
I would say intentional, or at least aware.
And so the Wonderland Trail, for those who don't know, that it is a trail that circumnavigates which mountain?
Mount Rainier in Washington. Yeah, it's a 93-mile loop with something near 30,000 feet of gain around Mount Rainier, and it's all within the national park and is stunning and amazing and beautiful, and you should totally go. Also, it is very heavily permitted and difficult to get on, which is a bummer, but necessary.
Yeah, we talked about some of the logistics last time. And if you're interested to hear more about those logistics, I encourage you to go back and listen to Christine's earlier episode on the podcast. What was the impetus for writing the book? You had done the attempted the AT. You then did the Wonderland Trail. Were you an English major in college?
No.
Did you ever see yourself as an author?
Maybe in a fantasy. I've always been really into books, so I think there was always a little thought in the back of my mind, maybe it would be fun to write a book someday, but it definitely wasn't something I was working towards.
And so why did this happen? What prompted you?
I think I had moved into my first van not too long before the Wonderland Trail, and I was traveling around alone, and I was feeling extremely lonely and battling with ideas around independence and loneliness. And then I went on the Wonderland Trail, spur of the moment. I made my way to Washington and I saw a sign for the trail, and I thought, I've heard other hikers talking about that trail and I've heard it's really pretty and maybe I can get on. So I did some research and just got on the trail a few days later. And as I was getting on the trail, I was asking myself a lot of questions about independence and loneliness and what those things meant in my life and if they were serving me and what my relationship to them was. And I actually just started asking other hikers, what do you think about hiking as a way to find or assert your independence? What's your relationship with that concept? And then asking them, are you lonely out here? And at the same time, I was being asked over and over again by everyone I passed, are you hiking alone? And getting this sort of, aren't you afraid? And do your parents know that you're out here by yourself? And that sort of line of questioning that I feel like especially women get a lot when they're in the outdoors alone. And so I was having one version of this reflected at me from everyone I was meeting. And then I was then asking questions of other hikers that I was interacting with as a personal exploration of these ideas. And what I came to throughout the hike was the realization that I wasn't the only person who was feeling the way that I was feeling. And that was really big for me because I had felt like I was the only person feeling that way. And it made me feel a lot better and it helped me a lot to talk to people about it. And I also felt like those people were really appreciative of me for asking the question and then saying, yes, I feel that way too. And so I was just really seeing the power of sharing that story and sharing those feelings with people in like vulnerable way. And so by the time I got to the end of the trail, I was like, I wish someone had written this story or told this story and let me know that I wasn't alone out here. And if no one else has written that book or shared that story, I guess maybe I should.
Yeah, to feel lonely is one thing, but then to feel like you're the only one who feels lonely, that's a whole nother level of isolation.
Yeah. And I think especially with the social media world around the outdoors, there is this narrative of like, solo female hikers, solo female van life, like solo, like it's like we really idolize and lift up this like solo traveler identity. And believe it or not, a lot of those people who are putting out that content are really lonely. And the more that I've gotten into that side of things and talked to those type of people, it's the same thing. It's those people are saying like, oh my gosh, this is such a lonely existence. And it is really easy to feel like you're the only person who's uncomfortable in that because we are showing this side on social media that's isn't it so great. We're not showing the side that's sad or lonely or difficult.
Right. And I think that they've done studies on the impact of social media on, I'm not sure which generation, multiple generations, probably all of us, that what is portrayed is all the positives, all the sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns. And in reality, there's so much more to that. And by me looking at your feed and seeing only the highlights, only the great things out there, and then looking at my life and saying, well, my life is not that great. I've got this issue and I've got that issue. You know, it makes you feel even worse about yourself.
Totally. Yeah. And that's something that I think about a lot as a person who uses social media for my job and shows people a lot of my life in a very, I like to think, pretty candid way, but definitely not every aspect, not every reality. Like there are for sure things that I'm not sharing on social media that people probably would relate to and also see me in a more realistic light if I shared.
Like the pea spots on your shoes.
Like all the pee on my shoes. Yeah.
Now, how do you reconcile this whole concept of independence and loneliness? In order to be independent, do you have to be lonely?
No, not at all. And I think that is what I was trying to explore within myself during that experience, was like, you don't have to be alone to prove how independent you are. And that independence can be a very real thing in your life without you being alone out there all the time. Because I really, since I went on the AT, then I moved to Denver where I don't have any family. I had 2 friends that were living in Denver when I moved here. And then I moved into a van, and then I was on the road, and then I was hiking the Wonderland, right? I was doing all of these things fairly alone, and a lot of it for the purpose of proving my independence to myself, to my parents, to whomever I felt I needed to prove that to.
Should we talk about what took you off the AT in 2015?
We can, yeah.
Yeah.
So I started the AT on March 20th, 2015, and my mom died on March 24th of 2015. So I'd hiked maybe 20 miles or something in the first 4 days. I got off the AT and went back to Arkansas for the memorial service and to be with my family. And then an uncle that I'm not very close with, one of my mom's brothers, said to me, "When are you going back out on the Appalachian Trail?" And I thought, that can't possibly be the appropriate thing to do in this moment. But after a few days, the more I thought about it, the more I realized the reason why I wanted to hike the AT is still true. And I don't know that there's very much I can actually do to be helpful at home. I didn't feel like there was anything practical that really needed me to be there. And so after I talked to my dad about it, I decided to go back on the trail. But when I went back out, I said, I'm not really worried about hiking the whole thing. I'm just going to hike until it doesn't feel like the right thing to do anymore. I ended up being on trail for 70 days total. I hiked from the beginning in Georgia to Harrisburg, Virginia, which is around mile 650. And then I went home at that point.
Now, I don't want to overgeneralize or generalize in general, but it's been my observation that daughters have complex relationships with their mothers. Just seeing my own wife, we've been hanging out since we were 16, watching the dynamic between her and her mother, watching the dynamic of my daughters and her, as well as my sisters, my stepsisters, and my stepmom. And it just seems to me, in my limited scope of experience, life experience, that the relationship between mothers and daughters seems a bit more complex than the relationship between sons and fathers. I could be totally wrong in many cases, but that seems to me to be a little more complicated.
That's interesting. I have so many thoughts. I don't know what to say first. I do think the relationship it can be very complicated. I think inevitably it is much easier to see the way that we as young women are turning into our mothers than perhaps like the relationship I have with my dad. Even though my dad and I have a lot in common and we are the same in a lot of ways, I don't look in the mirror and see my dad's face. And I do very much see my mom in me. And I think there's an evolution that we all go through where we're like young children who idolize our parents and think they know everything and can't do wrong because they are the people who are showing us how to exist in the world. And then we go through a rebellious teenage phase where we are trying to assert our independence as young people, right? And then a lot of times that carries into our 20s and when we're like leaving home for the first time and trying to figure out who we are. And then at a certain point, we recognize that our parents are like humans with flaws and their own backstories and their own baggage, and that everything they do and say and teach us is a reflection of that, for better or worse. And then I think there's like a level of forgiveness that comes along with recognizing that for most of us, our parents did the best job they could, even though we might look at it and go, why would they do that? And there are absolutely things that I look at now. And the hard part for me is my mom died 2 weeks before my 25th birthday. So I was perhaps on the cusp of recognizing her humanity and acknowledging her flaws and where they came from, and maybe blaming her less for the things that I felt she did wrong. And then she died, and I never got to forgive her or make amends or have an adult relationship with my mom, right? I just wasn't there yet when she got sick. And I think to everyone whose mom is still around, if you have gotten to the point where you recognize those things and are ready to forgive her and you have not said that, don't miss that opportunity to acknowledge that you don't blame her for the things that happened to her that made her the way she was, to do the things that she did for you. Does that make sense? Have I just rambled completely off?
Totally makes sense. And I agree with everything you just said. I think you hit the nail right on the head. There is no test that they give to people before they have kids, right? There's no competency test involved here. And when you're kids and you're naive and you don't know the whole story, you don't know life yet, you put those parents up on a pedestal, right? And at some point in your life, you realize that they were figuring it out, and they were figuring it out while they were raising you.
Yeah.
And they made mistakes just like I made mistakes.
And depending what generation you are, like, I'm 33 now. I was born in 1990. My mom was 25 when I was born. Like, she was a baby. I can't imagine having a kid, and I'm 33. So I think about like my maturity level at that age and like where she was starting from. And I have to be honest, like, my mom was a great mom. Like, she really loved us. She did everything she could for us. And like, the best of intentions, you're still going to make mistakes. Like, you're still going to do things and look back on them and go, I could have done that better. Or the person who is the product of that is going to say, wish you'd done that better. But I think that I guess one of my biggest regrets is just that I didn't have the chance to like have that conversation with her, and I don't, not clear the air, but just acknowledge all the work that she did. And yeah.
Now that came across very well in your book. Now, how are you feeling now? How are you doing now?
I think writing the book was a really therapeutic experience for me. I definitely didn't go into it with that intention. I actually didn't talk about my mom very much in the first draft. And my first editor was like, why aren't you talking about your mom in this book? She read the book and said, you need to talk about that in this, because you just mention it as if it's no big deal and then move on with the story. And that doesn't make any sense, because that mother-daughter relationship is core to who you are. And as I fleshed that out and talked about that, I think that really helped me a lot to put words to my feelings. And now it's been 8 years since she died. And I guess like the stages of grief. I'm going to go off on a tangent. But there's a book that talks about the stages of grief, and it talks about how they are not linear and you go through different stages, like on a cycle almost. And I think as more time passes between like your loss and wherever you are, the cycles become more gentle, and there is a lot less like overt sadness and like those kind of overwhelming emotions. And now I can look back on the first 25 years of my life and my relationship with her with a lot of gratitude, and I guess on some level thinking that she had the opportunity for that many years to teach me how to be in the world. And I have so many good qualities that I got from her. And it is a shame that she's not here anymore. And I wish that I had that relationship continuing into perpetuity, but I got a lot from her. And I am incredibly grateful for that. And I don't necessarily feel the need to be sad about it all the time. And maybe some people won't understand that. But I do think there's a point at which the basic emotion of sadness is not the main one that you're experiencing in grief anymore.
Yeah, when it happens, it's raw. But as time goes on, I think what you're talking about is gaining perspective. You're getting a more wide-angle view of your life growing up and understanding her as a person. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Now, I'm sure some of our listeners are wondering, when are we going to talk about trail? What's going on here? We've had a great therapy session here. It's been awesome, very interesting. And I appreciate you sharing all of this.
Of course.
Difficult conversation sometime. But let's talk about your recent time out on the AT. You recently did a section hike of the Shenandoah section.
I did.
And how did it go?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. The Shenandoah is beautiful. Some people poo on the Shenandoah because there's so many road crossings and you never feel like you're like super out there. But it was wildflowers everywhere. So green, so lush. And I haven't been back to the AT since 2015. And so most of my hiking has been like high elevation, Colorado, West Coast, dry, very different. And so being out there in the green tunnel, I was in heaven. And I'm like, I can't believe people take for granted this lush, wet, beautiful living place. Yeah, it was amazing.
So what called you back? Why make the trip from Colorado back to the AT?
Yeah, so the last 2 years I've gone to AT Trail Days to promote my book and to hang out with hikers and just have a good time. And this year, Heather Anderson, Anish, was going to be there also, and we have become friends through being riders and hikers and such. And she was actually going out to set an FKT for the Shenandoah section of the AT. And so I gave her a ride to one end of the trail, dropped her off, and then I drove to the other end of that section and hiked the opposite direction so that we would pass each other. So really, it was just because she asked me if I wanted to. And I was like, for many years, I've said I wasn't going to go back to the AT. I've held that I got what I needed from that trail and that I don't feel any desire to go finish it. And I don't think I would have gone if she hadn't suggested it. So I'm grateful.
If Heather Anderson asks you to do something, you're going to do it. That's an automatic.
I was like, sure, I can give you a ride. Like this, yeah, which was great. And it was also an amazing experience to be able to like see her. She had hiked 85 miles while I had hiked 30 when we passed each other. And to see her in that element was a really cool experience too.
Were you fangirling?
A little bit. We're friends. We talk regularly. I feel like I know her, not like she's a famous person, but she is very much a famous person. So it like in that element especially, I was like, wow, you're doing something really awesome right now. And I get to like witness that for 1 minute.
And was she successful in her FKT?
She was, yeah. So congrats to her. She also set an FKT for the Pennsylvania section of the Appalachian Trail about 2.5 weeks before that. So she did them back to back. She's a beast, man.
She is a beast. That is impressive. That is so impressive. And that as the perfect segue to our next topic, which is something big upcoming for you on the Ouachita Trail in Arkansas.
Ouachita Trail.
Ouachita. Thank you. I tried to pull that off. I fact checking in real time.
It's spelled very weirdly.
Yes, it is. Thank you. Here I am trying to up my game, and you're just cutting me off at the knees. Got it. Okay. No, that's good. Good. We want to make sure we get the name of the trail correct. Yes.
So things are a little up in the air with that right now. So last year I attempted to set an FKT on the Ouachita Trail in November, which is like the best time for that trail. And it did not go. I had no intentions of making another attempt. When I made that attempt, I said, I'm going to try it. If it doesn't go, I'm going to let the stream go. And we all know how that goes. So about a day after I got off the trail, I was like, there were some very objective things that went wrong that could be fixed or controlled. So I think maybe I should make another attempt because I don't feel like I gave it my physical all. But I had trained from about June of last year to November with that intention. And then after November, I took a couple months off. And then pretty recently, I guess in like April, I started training again to go out this November to make another attempt. And over the course of the last few months, I have basically done everything in service of that. And my brain has been very focused on that goal. And if anybody has ever done really long-term goals, it's hard to stay focused on one single goal without stepping stones along the way, without a strategic plan, which I didn't really have. I've just been like hiking as much as possible, running as much as possible, like trying to balance all of these different things with a chronic illness is really challenging. And so I've gotten a little bit burned out. And a couple weeks ago, I went out on the Centennial Trail in South Dakota. I had 60 miles in 2 days. I just wasn't having fun. And I got to a point mentally where I was just like, I'm not sure why I'm doing this. And I think that's all of this is part of the process of setting records or of doing really big, intense attempts on things. So part of me, even in this moment, knows this isn't the end. I am mentally stepping back and taking a break from my attachment to that goal this year, right now, but it's still 4 months away, 5 months. There's still a chance that I rally mentally in the next few months and decide to go for it, but I am not sure if that is on the schedule for this year or not. We'll see. Either way, I am going to hike the Ouachita Trail in November because I go to Arkansas for November every year to visit my dad. And I think some of the emotional reasons why I chose that trail, I still want to go hike it, but I think I want to go hike it and just have fun and then maybe make another speed attempt in the future. The great thing about that trail is it's a winter trail. So like November is the beginning of the season. And I thought that people mostly only hiked it like late October through December, like beginning of December. And then there's like a short window in the spring that you can do it if you want to maybe get caught in a tornado. It's doable, but there's a lot of rain. It's not as pleasant, I think, as like the November end of the season. But I was on the Facebook page. There's like a Ouachita Trail Facebook page. And I was on there from the time that I tried the trail last year through the winter. And I was like, people are hiking this trail all winter. December, January, February, like there's people out there the whole time. So I'm like, I might have more time than I think to make an attempt this season. I don't necessarily need to do it the first 2 weeks of November.
And so what are the logistics give us the details on the Ouachita?
Yeah, it's pretty remote. It's 223 miles. It has AT style shelters every 7 to 10 miles, which is awesome. There are very few resupply towns. About halfway through the trail, there is a little place called the Bluebell Cafe. I think Bluebird Cafe, something blue. And the lady who runs it is very hiker friendly, and she does a shuttle system where you can call her and get a shuttle. They have food at the cafe. You can do resupply. I think you can mail a resupply there. I don't think they have much in the way of a store. And that's about the best resupply. And then there's a few places where you walk through a state park and they have little gift shops and things, but it's pretty remote. There's not great resupply options, but there's no permitting. It's not a very well-known trail. So I hiked 56 miles in a day and a half, and I saw 3 people during the peak season for this trail. So if you want to be alone, the Ouachita Trail is a great place for it. Other considerations are hunting season. It is recommended if you're hiking during hunting season that you wear orange, which is super fun. And there are bears and other wildlife out there, but they are of very little concern as far as I've heard, because the trail is not very popular. They're not like accustomed to people and people food.
And were you planning on doing the supported FKT, unsupported FKT?
I was doing self-supported.
Self-supported?
Yeah, which means you can...
Go ahead.
Do you want me to explain that? Yeah. So unsupported means you carry all of your supplies the entire way. Self-supported means that you can resupply. Basically, you can use anything that through hikers have access to. So if there's trail magic, you can take it. If you need to hitchhike into town, if through hikers are allowed to hitchhike into town, you can do that. You can do food drops and you can do resupplies. A lot of times on the Ouachita Trail, people will do basically a food cache where you hide it in the woods in a bear canister and then you pick it up when you come through. So that's what I was doing. And then also last season was a drought season. And so there were a lot of trail magic water caches. And so if you were going unsupported, you were not allowed to use those. But if you're going self-supported, you can.
So what is the current women's self-supported FKT on the Ouachita Trail?
There is not one.
Oh.
There is no record.
You might set it having fun then.
Maybe there's a minimum amount of daily mileage to report at FKT where it's okay, someone probably hasn't already done that. And that is around the 30-mile mark. So
how do you determine that? Who sets that benchmark?
It's not a written rule. I asked around some people I know in the FKT world, if there's not a record set, what would you say is the minimum mileage per day that you would record a record? And the consensus seemed to be around 30.
And could you do 30 miles for 7.5 days?
I don't know. I haven't done it.
Have you done 30 miles in 7.5 days on any other trail before?
No. Nope.
Yeah. And what is your current level of fitness? Because every time I see you on social media, you're running somewhere.
Yeah. About 2 weeks ago, I hiked 60 miles in 2 days on the Centennial Trail. And that is That's my max out of like back to back. And I did do 85 miles on the AT and the Shenandoah in 4 days, which is like 20 plus per day. That was my like warm up to see, can I do 20 miles per day for 4 days in a row? And then I'm like stepping up from there. So it's possible. I think I'm physically capable for sure if I'm trained and nothing goes horribly awry. But the problem with FKTs, and the reason why it's such an impressive endeavor, is that things do go wrong. And a lot of your ability to set a record is not so much, can I hike a 30-mile day, but how do I handle XYZ things going wrong and mentally stay in the game?
Yeah. Now, can I make a prediction?
Okay.
You are, as you said, self-described type A, focused, driven. You're going to go out there to have fun, and you're not going to let it go. You know the mileage already. It's up here. We're going to see an FKT. That's my prediction. I could be wrong.
See.
I've been wrong before. Ask my wife.
I am not ruling it out, but I think that I have gone out with a mentality of trying to set a record, and I've gotten in my head and things have gone wrong. And I think I want to focus on just seeing the trail. And part of that is research, right? A lot of people don't go out to set an FKT on a trail that they've never hiked before. And I've only hiked 56 miles of this trail. So I'm like, maybe I just need to go see the trail and feel the land and see what my obstacles are going to be, and then make another attempt afterwards.
I don't know if it's my social media feed and who I follow and what I like, but I'm seeing FKTs all over the place, all over the world. It's just amazing what people are doing out there on the trail.
It's getting really popular, and there's a movement right now to get more women setting FKTs because there are so many trails that don't have women's records. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I was excited to do this, is because there just aren't a ton of women competing in the sport. And I can tell you, there are a lot of women out there who are much more impressive athletes than I am. And like these ultra runners who are just like crushing 100-mile races and stuff. And if they were out there setting FKTs, there'd be no room for someone like me on the trail. But I think that's part of the thing too, is anyone can set an FKT, and they're, especially on longer trails, a lot of times through hikers, people who have a history of through hiking, are better candidates to set an FKT than an ultra runner.
And why is that? Why do you think?
Because ultra runners know how to suffer for a day. And through hikers, we know how to suffer for 6 months. It's just a different mentality.
I like that.
And it's also a different mentality of, I think through hikers have some, maybe a slightly better concept of like how to pace themselves and when to rest and when to slow down. And a lot of times, if you're only running 100 miles only, that will be done in a day and a half. And then if you wreck yourself, like you could just rest afterwards. But when you're doing a long distance hike and you have to get up and hike again tomorrow, and get up and hike again tomorrow, and get up and hike again tomorrow, there's a little bit of a different mentality around that.
Christine Reed has thrown the gauntlet down.
All right, through hikers, let's get out there.
Now, let's talk about a couple of things happening for you off the trail. You got a couple of very interesting projects coming up. You want to talk about those?
Yeah. So the first one is a short story collection book called Blood, Sweat, and Tears. And I am currently accepting submissions from hikers and runners, trail runners, specifically women, about their experiences of being in a female body on trail. The book is going to be cut into 3 segments. So there will be basically a chapter of stories under the category blood, one under sweat, and one under tears. So I want your most gruesome period stories. I want to hear just like the reality of it, because we don't talk about that. And I cannot tell you how many women's trail memoirs I have read where they do not mention having a period. And I'm just like, really? And if you don't have one, why? Tell me. I want to know. And I think that, especially from in the past year and a half, I've been on book tour. I've given lots of talks. I've given lots of talks in women-only spaces. And I also belong to a lot of women's-only groups on Facebook and other like social media places. And anytime we're in a women's-only space, the first question that gets asked is like, what do you do about your period? And so I know this is something we're all thinking about. I know it's something we're all dealing with. And people are allowing this to keep them off the trail. there are women who are not hiking because they don't know or are worried about this. And so it's one of those, representation is super important. Sharing those stories is super important, and normalizing that this is a thing that's going to happen and here's how you deal with it. And sometimes it's ugly and uncomfortable and just downright crappy. And that's fine. It's okay. It's okay to have a bad day because you are hiking 20 miles and also bleeding. So I hope that doesn't make you too uncomfortable, Doc.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. I've got 2 daughters and a wife.
You have daughters, right?
That's right. That's right. That's right. And I love that you are sharing the information that needs to be shared. We talked about earlier about we only see the highlights in social media. How are people supposed to figure this stuff out?
And the thing too is I posted videos from high pointing Maryland and high pointing West Virginia when I was on my East Coast trip, and I was bleeding horribly that day. And I'm like out here hiking, and I'm like, one, we as women are trained and told by society that we have to pretend this isn't happening 4 days a month, and that our life is just like exactly the same as any other day, and that we're supposed to just be as glamorous and strong and able as any other day, and that we should be ashamed and not let people know. And I'm like, I should be getting bonus points for being out here in this state doing this, and nobody knows that today I'm bleeding and doing this anyway. And why? I think we should be recognized.
If it was a guy going through this, you would absolutely know he was going through it. Yeah.
And if you were like out there hiking with a broken wrist or something, you'd be like, look at me, look what I'm still capable of doing, even though I'm like dealing with this obstacle. And so I think it's silly. And I also just think that we should dispel shame around these topics, and that this is something that like literally half of us are doing. So why are we pretending it's not happening? It's just, I want to share those stories because I think there's a level of empowerment to be had there. I also think that you would be surprised how many men would be curious to read these stories too. And I think there is a lot of power in informing people about experiences that aren't theirs and sharing that, and some level of empathy that could be gained by telling these stories and being really honest about the experience. So
I think that's one of the big problems in our society today is not walking a mile in other people's shoes often enough. I think we are all stuck on our own echo chambers, thinking that our way of thinking and our way of existing is the only way, the right way. And we think less of other people because of that. And I think by you sharing these stories and opening this up and allowing us to be empathetic and experiencing other people's experiences, I think that's very powerful.
Yeah. So that was only a teeny part of that. So there will be a category for that, and then there will be the sweat category, which will be more about battling your physicality and doing hard things. And I, especially as a person with chronic illness, I know there's lots of people in that world in the hiking. There's overlap between people with chronic illness, people with different injury history and things like that, and then hikers. And so I want to hear some of those stories about the realities of being in a body on the trail and dealing with the hard things that happen. And then the tears section will be more like the emotional side of that. What are the emotional things that you're working through on the trail? I really want some stories about people just like ugly crying on the side of the trail. And what brought you to that? And like, how is the trail helping you heal? And what's that experience? So it's like a little bit, these 3 different categories. I'm excited because I think there's a lot of overlap between those experiences. And so
you have to be a woman, right?
Yeah.
I can't submit my ugly crying story. It won't be published.
No, but I would love to read that too.
Okay. All right.
So I'm accepting submissions until August 20th. Is this episode going to come out before then?
It is not.
Okay.
But knowing that there is that deadline, you know what? I may do this as a bonus episode. We need to get this information out there.
I would love that if you have the availability.
We will do it. We'll do an extra episode. Yes.
Yeah, so I'm accepting submissions until August 20th. I'm not reading any of them until the submissions are closed so that I can go in with one mindset, read all of them, and choose which ones will be included in the book. I'm thinking it'll probably be about 20 stories in the book. And then I will do my darndest to get it published as quickly as possible. I also am interested in potential submissions or pitches from artists to do the book cover. So if anybody is in the hiking world and has an idea for a book cover, I'm definitely looking for that. I have a few ideas of artists in the hiking world that I'm interested in working with, but I'm feeling like very overwhelmed because I'm not a visual person. So knowing what I want is tricky. So that I'm hoping will be out I'm going to say some like crackpot timeline by the end of the year, but we'll see. These things take time. And then I'm also hoping to launch a podcast.
Before we get to the podcast, though, I
Do
dropped
you have more questions?
I dropped a name to you, and I dropped your name to her about submitting for this project. And I truly hope that she follows through on it, because I had the chance to spend 90 minutes with her on an episode, and she's a firecracker. I mean, she's just full of enthusiasm and stories. And so she knows who she is. And I hope she follows through and applies for this.
Nice. Yeah, the other thing I wanted to say is you don't have to be a writer to write a story for this. If you have a story that you feel like would fit in, and write it the best that you can, there will be an editing process. I'm really excited about sharing people's stories. It doesn't really matter what your writing skill is. So don't be intimidated by, oh, I'm not really a writer. I don't think you have to be a writer to tell a compelling story. So tell everyone about this project.
Yep. And what's this about, a podcast?
Well, yeah, I'm also interested in starting a podcast. It's something I've been interested in doing for a very long time, but am very intimidated by, because audio is scary to me in terms of mastering and editing and doing the clippy things. Like, technology, all of that is very intimidating to me. But I'm interested in doing a podcast. It would also be sharing women's stories, called Rugged Outdoors Women Podcast. And it would be a little bit more geared towards what it means to be rugged, which is something that I have thought about a lot as a person who took that name on, ironically, many years ago. And then my identity has changed a lot. And so it would be all sports. So the book is just hiking and trail running. The podcast would be all sports, and it would be a little bit more like broad topic. So I'm not currently working through submissions for that, because I don't want to get it confused with the book, because they are slightly different. And I felt like if I opened up submissions for both, that people would be confused by that. So right now I'm doing submissions for the book. Once that's closed, then I will start talking about the podcast more publicly and opening up submissions for that. But it is going to be in the style of, have you listened to the Out There podcast with Willow Belden?
I have, yes.
Okay. So it's more of a produced storytelling style. So I'm going to be doing that style, and then there will probably be like a short interview segment at the end. So it'll be like a produced story where you, as the writer or the storyteller, would write a story, and then it would be scripted and you would tell it. And then it would be edited, so it'd be all beautiful with sound effects and stuff. And then there'd be like a little fun interview at the end. And I am paying people for their submissions for both of these projects.
Wow. You've really set the bar high. I feel inferior now.
I think it's a totally different category of thing, right?
It is. And I love the concept. I can't wait to tune in.
Yeah, I'm really excited about both projects. I've gotten really amazing feedback from people about like their excitement level for it. So it's really awesome when you have an idea and you start telling people about it and they're like, that sounds so cool. I'm like, not just, I was pretty sure it was cool because I thought it was cool.
Does Heather Anderson think it's cool? That's the question we should be asking.
She said she would write a story for it. Yeah.
All right.
It's Heather Anderson approved.
Stamp of approval. Hey, Christine, you know where we are?
Is it time's up?
Time is not up.
Oh no, I have to give everyone a tip.
Hiking hacks.
Hiking hacks. That's right. You realized just a little bit too late. You lost some points there. It's time for you to share some trail wisdom with our listeners to make their next outdoor experience even better. What have you been saving up?
I think the one that's top of mind for me right now is don't sacrifice eating hot food to go light.
Yes, you actually just gained points. You were at 61, you're now at 75.
Wow.
Cold soaking is, you talked about being uncomfortable for a day if you're an ultra runner, and really being uncomfortable, unnecessarily uncomfortable, are the cold soakers for months.
Months. Yeah. And I have ditched the stove for some of my like speed hiking attempts. And honestly, it's less about weight than it is about time, just like the sitting with the stove and the doing the cooking and all that jazz. And I did not go to cold soaking because so I went from cooking food to only eating bars and like dry food, which I don't, is that better than cold soaking? I don't know. Like, I just I can't wrap my head around cold soaking.
Marginally better.
I'm like out there eating like runner's gels and things, which a lot of people probably couldn't do, but I would prefer that over like cold ramen.
Yeah. As we started the interview tonight, what were you eating?
I was eating a Bobo's bar.
A bar. Yeah. All right.
I'm a savage. What can I say?
So there you have it. We are just about done here. Hope our listeners enjoyed our time with our savage Christine Reed, aka Lady Unicorn. I want to thank her for joining us this week. Christine, how can our listeners keep up with you on social media, and where can they find updates on your latest adventures?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram and TikTok and Threads now, no more Twitter, at Rugged Outdoors Woman. And you can check out my website, which is now rebranded as ruggedoutdoorswoman.com. And I have an email sign up list if you're interested in that. That's like the more direct way. I'm on a new social media diet, but I am still very accessible on the social medias. I'm sorry we didn't talk about that before.
Bury the lead. Social media diet. Okay. We've got to have you back on for another episode now. Now, how is Threads?
It's Twitter, but not Twitter. Okay, one of my favorite things about Threads is that I didn't have to abbreviate my handle. And on Twitter, there was like a limited number of characters. And so Rugged Outdoorswoman was like missing a bunch of letters, which felt silly to me. This is one of my favorite improvements.
Nice. Way to drill down into the minutia there. That's great. Now, Twitter just feels like it's going south. So I'll just leave that there. I'm not going to go deep into that. I'll just say, remember to check out Hiker Trash Radio on social media as well. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you have comments or clips you want to share, you send it to me at hikertrashradio@gmail.com.
Off the beaten path.
Christine, unfortunately, we can't always be on the trail. And when we're not, we need to find a way to get our adventure fix. Lady Unicorn, I'm going to ask you to share some outdoor adventure media with our listeners to help them get by. This could be a book or a movie, documentary, podcast, possibly. We call this segment Off the Beaten Path. What do you have for us?
I just got a copy of A Walk Through Neverland by Deanna Carmela. I don't know if it's Deanna or Diana, but it's spelled with a Y, so I think it's Deanna. And she hiked the Pacific Northwest Trail and wrote a book about it. And I don't know of any other books about the Pacific Northwest Trail. And so I'm maybe a quarter of the way through it and loving it. And it just came out. So if you haven't heard of that, check that out.
A Walk Through Neverland. I feel like that is very simpatico with Alone in Wonderland.
Yeah, when I reached out to her and was like, hey, do you want to trade books? She was super psyched about the overlappings of our stories. Yeah, and she seems lovely. I've talked to her very minimally, but I'm really excited to continue being friends with her. And then I'm trying to look like what's on my bookshelf that I haven't read yet. I don't know. Nothing is right next to me that I'm really jazzed about.
All right, you gave it you have not heard of before, so that's good.
Yeah, that's a new one. And then she also has a podcast that she co-hosts with another gal that I'm going to be interviewing on soon. And if you give me one sec, I can probably tell you what it's called.
Yes, let's take that extra second to get another competing podcast into my podcast.
Yeah, you can totally like edit this, me opening my email to find this. Let's see. Bush and Banter.
Bush and Banter. I like that.
Yeah.
The alliteration.
And I don't know if it's only hiking or if it's more like generally outdoorsy. I haven't listened to it yet.
Okay. All right. We will have to check that out.
What have we not asked you?
And before we wrap things up, that's Half Calf, by the way, my daughter, who is totally American, born in the U.S., but likes to fancy some kind of accent. I'm not sure what it is, but last segment for you called What Have I Not Asked You That You're Dying to Tell Us About? What do we miss tonight?
Oh my gosh, I feel like we've talked about so many things.
We covered a lot of ground. I know what we missed. We missed your shirt. You referenced your shirt earlier about this whole unicorn. You found something from when you were 9 years old. Let's see it.
Yeah, I wanted to show everyone my sweet 3 Wolf Moon unicorn shirt.
Wow, that seems like a rock cover album.
That I cut the sleeves off.
Yeah.
Super hardcore. Yeah, I had this in a drawer. For someone who has minimized and gotten rid of things like 20 times in the last 10 years, somehow this shirt has survived. And I recently found it and was like, this is happening. I'm just going to wear this every day now.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that. All right. All right. We are finished. Thank you for coming on the podcast. We want to wish you the very best in your future FKT attempt, whether that is this year or next year. And we hope you'll consider coming back on and sharing some more stories with us. As we close up, any shout outs to friends and family, Christine?
I wasn't prepared for that. To all of my awesome hiker friends and everyone who's encouraged me along the way to do things that are hard and scary so that I can then encourage other people to do things that are hard and scary.
Nice said. It's like you're an author or something. All right. Hey, thank you for tuning in. Always remember the trail is the trail. It doesn't care if you want to go downhill. It doesn't care if it's almost dark and you're looking for a campsite. It doesn't even care if you are an oatmeal evangelist and you're on the verge of another Britney moment. The trail is the trail. Embrace the suck.